Welcome to The Real with your host Maria Nichols from Surrender Radio and Mary Callie of Next Chapter Radio on the Next Chapter Radio Network. The show that will uncover and expose real issues that you may or may not know of in this real world that we live in. Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to The Real with Maria Nichols and Mary Callie. I am Mary Callie. My co-host Maria Nichols can't be with us this evening, but we're going to keep it pushing, as she would say. And guess what, guys? I'm so excited. I have a very special guest coming on tonight. And believe you me, it's not just going to be tonight. We're going to be doing a series of what's going on in this world based on his book, The Genesis 6 Conspiracy. That's right, I'm talking about Gary Wayne. Now, for those of you who don't know Gary, let me give you a little bit of background on him. Gary is a Christian author that has maintained a lifelong love affair with biblical prophecy and mythology and history, and his extensive study basically encompasses the Holy Bible and other scriptures that are out there and other texts and, like the Quran and so forth and so on, even Gnostic scriptures that are out there. But he is a dynamic researcher and his book is phenomenal. I can tell you the book is basically, I'm not going to really get into too much of what the book is because we're going to do a series on his book. And believe you me, what took place in Genesis 6 is happening right now. Okay. Gary has done an excellent job with this book. Guys, if you have not gotten this book, please get it. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on as a hard copy, or you can get a Kindle version. You can go to a Christian bookstore and have them order it, or you can get it at Barnes and Nobles. It's an excellent book. The book is basically about the giants, and a lot of people say giants. What do you mean giants? Well, back in Genesis 6, the sons of God, which were the angels, actually came down and went into the daughters of men, which means they had sex with them, and now you have these giant-like humanoid people, which were really not human. Okay, to be honest with you, roaming the earth and defouling it beyond what it's supposed to be, to the point where God had to literally, people think the flood was just because of, Sodom and Gomorrah. That's a small portion. There was a lot of garbage going on. There was a lot of things happening that started with these fallen angels that came down and actually had sex with the daughters of men and created these beings. That one famous giant that a lot of people know of is Goliath. Well, he was a small potato compared to some of these giants that were roaming the earth. We really need to pay attention because there are a lot of things that are going on in this world. There's a lot of DNA manipulation. They're looking at chromosome manipulation. They're doing things to our food, things in the air, stuff in the water. They're indoctrinating you to whether it's in their educational system or indoctrinating you through entertainment, what you see on TV or theater or the movies, to get you acclimated to what's coming, so that when it does come, you'll have a memory of it some kind of way, even if it's in a fictional way, to be able to put it together and say, oh yeah, I remember that. Okay, so you won't be so freaked out and caught off guard by it, but you should be. I'm going to tell you that right now. You should be. Anyway, it is about giants. It's about bloodlines. It's also about Lucifer's revenge, which is the chapter we're going to go over tonight. We're going to scratch it. Yo, do yourself a favor. Get your Bibles out, paper and pencil out, because you're going to need to do your own research. Don't take our word for it. Research it for yourself, and believe you me, you're going to be amazed. All right, so let me go ahead and bring Gary Wayne on, the author of Genesis 6 Conspiracy, and the first thing we're going to talk about is chapter 13 of his book, Lucifer's Revenge. Hey Gary, how you doing?
Doing very good, and so happy to be here tonight and to dig into the book with you. And I'm hoping we're going to have, some interesting things for your listeners to maybe tag on to and maybe dig into a little bit further once we start talking about it. But just absolutely ecstatic to be here tonight.
Well, I'm happy to have you. Normally, my co-host Maria would be online with me as well, but she'll be on, I'm sure, on the next one. Anyway, we're happy to have you on. Thank you for being on The Real. Do our listeners a favor, because they don't know you. Okay, maybe one or two might know you because I was on another network, but this group don't know you. So do me a favor. Tell them about yourself. Tell them about how you got into this and how you think it could benefit people if they were to know this information.
Okay. Well, I reside in Vancouver, Canada. I've been a prophecy buff for, probably going on, 35 years. And it was, and maybe some of your listeners may remember, but, when I got out of high school and into the workforce, I fell away from God and walked a little different path. And my brother came along one day and said, "You need to read this book." And it was a book by Hal Lindsey, who wrote The Late Great Planet Earth in the 70s. So in about 1981, 81 in that zone, this book was given to me, and I just couldn't believe what Hal was writing about. And so I wanted to learn about it and verify it, because it literally scared me straight again. And so as I started to research and find that, Hal was certainly right on a lot of these things way back then when things weren't quite as clear as they are today, I became a prophecy buff. And so I went through and I cataloged for my own references what I thought were all the different stories and narratives of prophecy right from Genesis through Revelation. And as I was doing it and logging just so many different streams that move along in the whole story in the Bible and prophecy in particular, I ran across this strange verse in Genesis 6. And I thought, well, that's really rather odd why giants would be in Genesis 6. And then I kept reading about these giants as the Old Testament was unfolding, and into Exodus and into the conquest of the Promised Land, and then also understanding that in Matthew and the other Gospels, Jesus, and I really put a lot of weight on defining everything that I do and I read about exactly what Jesus said, and particularly in prophecy, I like to go to what he says first and then assemble everything around that, as opposed to vice versa. I just think we need to get that in the right order, but that's my approach. And so when he talks about the end time is going to be like the days of Noah, that really struck me. And when you get into Revelation and you hear about the demons and the fallen angels and the war in heaven and the abyss and all of this stuff that is seemingly somehow connected back to before the flood. And also with what Jesus had said, I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to write my shortest book first, and I'm going to do this very easy book, and I just want to explore what the giants of Genesis 6, the Nephilim of Genesis 6, have to do with prophecy and how that funnels into the end time. So I thought I would write a really short book, but as it turned out, in the writing of the book, it was 8 to 10 years, and I've done like 35 years now in research on all sorts of subjects like this. And so that's how I ended up writing the Genesis 6 conspiracy. And as I did more research, more doors just kept opening and more dots were being connected. And I could have literally kept writing forever. And, I also literally cut 25% out of the book just to get it published. So what I wanted to do with the book is to tell a complete narrative, because everything that is sort of out there has small slivers, and a lot of it's speculation. So I wanted to tell one narrative from Genesis 6 to Revelation and connect all of the dots and do it in a manner that people could check out the research and look for themselves, because again, there's a lot of speculation out there. And I also wanted people to be aware of that what our Bible teaches us is similar to what the forces trying to bring about the end time are doing. They believe the same thing. They just have a completely different perspective on it. And so in the book, I try and let them, as the book unfolds, speak for themselves, although I do weigh everything against what is in the Bible first.
Okay. Guys, just to let you know, you said a short book, right?
That was the intention.
That was the intention. Let me tell you, I see why they said you had to cut out 25%. There are 98 chapters in this book. Okay?
Plus plus a preface and an epilogue. So just making it even 100.
But can I tell you something? It's an easy read. These chapters are not long. They're not long chapters, but it's an easy read, and it's like you fly through these chapters. As you're reading this book, you're going to want to get out your Bible, and you're going to also want to do some more research. You're going to want to research everything from Enoch to Lilith to all of this stuff. I mean, you're going to want to research a lot of stuff. Now, there's one chapter in your book, and I know you've been on a lot of shows, and people always seem to go to the Nephilim and the giants, and there was giants in earth in those days, Genesis 6, which your book is named after, and they seem to stay there. But there's a chapter in your book, chapter 13, appropriately numbered, by the way, for this.
I thought it was too.
for this individual, he deserves 13, and it has to do with Lucifer. Matter of fact, the name of the chapter is Lucifer's Revenge, and you referenced Isaiah chapter 14 verses 12, 13, and 14. And for those who don't know what that is, I suggest you get your Bible out and just read those verses in that chapter, and you'll be surprised. I'm not going to read it for you. I got it right here, but you're going to have to do the research yourself. Read that. It basically has to do with how Lucifer, he's angry at God, to be honest with you, and he wants to be God. He wants to be like God. He's a God in his own mind, and to probably certain people in this world, small g, but he wants to be like God. He tries to do everything God does. He can't create anything. So what he does is he manipulates things right down to our genome. First, I got a question. The question is, what made you decide to put that chapter in? What is the significance of what you're writing in that chapter, and how does it pertain from yesterday to today?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I'll try. I would have preferred to have inserted this chapter as chapter 1, but I knew that if I started with Lucifer's Revenge as chapter 1, I might lose people very, very quickly, and I wanted them to get into the book, and after about 12 chapters, all of a sudden, this chapter has a whole lot of credibility, because the chapter 13 with Lucifer's Revenge is the whole backdrop to our very existence, what has happened, what is happening, and what will happen, and all of this information about Lucifer is for the most part in every culture around the world. And I cite some examples in chapter 13 on, whether it's the Quiché Maya or, some other religions of the world, and the fairy mythology in particular, and I might touch on that one in a second. In order to understand what is going on with us and what our destiny is we have to understand who Lucifer is.
Exactly.
What he was, what happened to him, and what his reaction to failing in the rebellion against God, why how he understood that, and what he was going to do about it, and let alone what was his motive for rebelling against God. But it goes to the heart of why we were created, and what has played out through history, and our rendezvous with destiny, and how he's manipulating everything to make this happen. And so, when we look at Lucifer in the fairy mythology, as a real good example, is that he wanted to be like God, and he knew that probably wasn't going to happen, but he felt that in the fairy mythology that he could somehow prove his point to a point where he could at least have another universe to rule over, and he could be like God. If he couldn't defeat God, he wanted his own universe. But of course, God did not accept that in the fairy mythology, and so the fairies, the original fairies, and there's 4 different kinds with some ones and the little people. But the first category is the fallen angels, and they do remember them in the fairy mythology as coming to earth after the fall.
Right.
But moving on more towards what's in the Bible is that, and how we understand what is going on with us is that Lucifer was permitted to have and remain governing over all of the areas that he had held before, and that includes the earth. And one probably presumes most of the physical world, because he was one of the most important beings ever created by God, and one of the most powerful beings. And so when God creates humankind, the descendants of Adam, what happens is he is saying to the rebellious angels that I am going to, through free choice, permit, and free choice which the angels didn't have because they were created as sons of God, and immortal. So they didn't have a choice. They were just created, and they can't die. That's the other real significant issue here. And with what's coming to them is not a pleasant thought, but they cannot die. And humans were created to have free choice and to choose God, and at a point in time to be raised over angels and over the dominions that Lucifer and the seraphim angels that he's also part of, as well as cherubim, already are ruling over. So they were going to lose everything to this being made of clay, and something that's akin to a primate is what I would say in the book. Not that we are primates, but we are very, very similar, at least from a DNA makeup. And I do believe we were created by God, and we were created from the dust of the earth, and I am not
you're not an evolutionist.
Evolution. No, absolutely not.
You're not a Darwinian.
And so not only Lucifer, but the angels that followed him looked at this creation and said, this creation only has evil in it. And you're going to raise this over top of us. And so Lucifer's revenge starts to take place, is that they're going to say, we're going to figure out a way to prevent this from happening. Again, I don't know how you think that you can fool God or outmaneuver God, but we'll come to this maybe a little bit later in the discussion as to what my thoughts on his motives were.
I guess Lucifer is a little narcissistic.
Oh, he's very narcissistic. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
And so he starts to say, how am I going to bring down humankind so that they can't be raised above angels? And then, therefore, we are going to remain in the positions that we are. So he creates the scenario for Adam and Eve to fall in Eden as his first revenge. And then he inserts the serpent seed, as a lot of people like to talk about it, with the Nephilim in Genesis 6, to enslave humankind and to prevent them from meeting their destiny. And so, the book is about why the Nephilim and the fallen angels and the relationship with the descendants of Cain and the secret societies and the rise of mysticism, how all of that came together to totally corrupt the world and to prevent the descendants of Adam, and in this case the descendants of Seth, from being able to be in a position after the resurrection to be raised higher than gods. And of course we have the flood. And so this whole backdrop is just boiling as context of why Lucifer and the fallen angels have to prevent humankind from being in a position to be raised higher than them. What they didn't anticipate, though, was the resurrection.
Right.
And although they were trying to destroy humankind, I do not believe that they saw that coming. But they did try and destroy Israel after the flood in several occasions and prevent, the nation of hope from coming about. I think their approach might have been different had they realized that there would be a resurrection. But, we're talking about something that wasn't before, and probably a thought that wasn't before, that only God had held out.
Right.
And so that would be how or why Lucifer would not expect that, let alone sending his word, who created humankind to the world to be implanted in a vessel, a human vessel, and to overcome human weaknesses and the emotions and everything that you're subjected to in the physical realm, and be sacrificed as the Lamb of God in perfection to atone for all of the sins.
Now, I gotta stop you a little bit before you go a little bit further on. Let's go back and let's pretend that our listeners don't know what a Nephilim is and how Nephilims are made compared to then and now, which is part of that whole Lucifer revenge on mankind based on his hatred for God. Basically, he hated God, and he definitely hates us because, God made us in his image, and, Lucifer being who he is, I guess got jealous beyond jealous and doesn't think that, they're here to serve us as well. But explain to the listeners, if they do not know what a Nephilim is, and basically how it was then, how a Nephilim is today, or how that could be penetrated today.
Yeah, and I'll come from it from a couple of different perspectives so that people have a complete understanding. And just let me backtrack to something that I'll sort of talk about later in the book. But to me, it's the new man concept of the Nazis.
Okay.
And it's all related as this concept, and it is created in Genesis 6, maybe before, but for the most part in Genesis 6, and it's about creating this Superman, this Batman, this superhero. And what a Nephilim is, in the purest sense of this word and in the ancient sense, is where a fallen angel, and in this case a seraphim fallen angel, and a seraphim fallen angel looked like a viper or a snake, so it had the face of a snake. The sons of God, as they were also recorded in the Bible, they go to the daughters of Cain, or as it says in the Bible, the daughters of men, although in the book I'll identify them as the daughters of Cain and make a case for that, on Mount Hermon, and they have sex with these human females, and through that sexual encounter create a giant. And this giant in the first generation was born immortal.
Okay.
Because it had the immortal spirit of the fallen angels.
So they weren't demigods.
They were not in the first generation.
Okay.
They were more or less a full-blown physical god.
They could not die, even though they were born of woman?
Yeah.
And
so that's why in Genesis 6, and I know a lot of people like to use this line to say, well, that's the time between the announcement and when the flood comes, where God steps in and says, I am going to limit the age of humankind to 120 years.
Right.
And then that dilutes over time, and actually we're shorter than the 120 years, but we're told we could possibly live to be 120 years by modern science today, unless they do something else on DNA to change that.
They're working
and so that was a constitutive pillar in ancient society, that these were gods or angels that went to humans and had sex with them and created these lower gods. And so when you hear of the word demon in the New Testament, and God dealt with a lot of demons, and the most famous one that people like to use in movies is Legion, because there's so many of them.
Right.
Well, and they're afraid that Jesus is going to send them back to the abyss. And the abyss is where these fallen angels were imprisoned for having sex with the daughters of men to create the giants. So when the physical body died, or they committed suicide because they were in such pain because the physical body wasn't immortal, only the spirit.
Right.
When that died out, then the spirit remained, but it wasn't allowed to go to heaven. They weren't permitted to go to sleep, and those are the demons that affect the world today. And so demons are distinctly different than fallen angels, and many people confuse them. And that's why they were afraid that Jesus was going to send them to the abyss where the fallen angels were in prison.
Okay.
And so these demons are out there today. So yes, they were immortal in the first generation, but after that, they were, even though they lived for long periods of time, they were then called demigods.
Okay.
So they're part angel, part human, but they're not fully God because they weren't immortal.
Now, what is the height of the original Nephilim? Because, if I'm not mistaken, I'm reading my Bible and whatnot, and I just rededicated my life back to Christ about 2 years ago, October in 2014, almost 2 years ago. And I haven't read that part yet, but I've distinctly remember hearing preachers preach on this every once in a while when I was young, about how these giants were devouring. They were eating up the land, basically. Whether it was people, animals, and we know they were doing stuff against them. But how big do you think were the first generation of giants?
They were somewhere between, in my opinion, 20 to 40 feet. And that tends to be the most standard sort of height that people will utilize. Now, if you have some readers out there who have read the book of Enoch, there's a measurement called elves, E-L-L.
Yeah, elves. Mm-hmm.
And so I don't believe modern translations has the accuracy of that length, because I believe it says that they were 300 ells, which would be 200 to 300 feet.
Yeah, I read that, and I was like, that's huge.
That's huge.
That's
now,
huge.
I think a fallen angel could make themselves that large with their shape-shifting capability. I know I just opened another rabbit trail.
Yeah, well, that's okay. That's okay, because we're going to go every rabbit hole you open, we're going down that eventually.
The Nephilim, I do not believe they were that big, but 20 to 40 feet is within the realm. And even after the flood, and King Og is thought to have survived the flood because he's described as a giant that is the last of the Rephaim, and unless that is miswritten, then he can't be the last of the Rephaim, because the Rephaites survived beyond Og. So, and his brother Sihon was also a Rephaite as well. And his bed, again, depending on which measurement that you're going to be using, and this gets a little bit technical, but to make it simply, a standard cubit is about 18 inches and a royal cubit is 21 inches. So when you hear measurements of 13 feet long that the bed was for King Og, that could be as high as 16 feet if it was a royal cubit. And I make the case in the book that it would be probably royal cubits that they would have been measuring on, because the Nephilim were all of the kings. So even at that time, he had to be in at least 14 or 15 feet tall. And Goliath, by a royal cubit measurement, and I'll track him later in the book back to being a Rephaim, would have been, 11 to 12 feet tall.
Now, here's the thing, people. You got to understand something. A cedar tree is pretty tall. I mean, they get pretty big. But do this. If you have a big oak tree in your yard, or in anybody's yard, go and stand against it. Okay? And look up. Just look up and just imagine a person being that big. Imagine the stride that they would take. Just one stride. Just imagine how big the foot is. Imagine how big their mouth is, how big their teeth are. Imagine how large their hands are. I mean, when you start putting this thing in a scope, of how massive this thing is, you're talking, like you said, 20 to 40 feet. Can you imagine the appetite on this individual? I mean, there's not enough food. At this point in time, that's what they were. How is that going to work in today's time? Because I know we're doing things with DNA. People are getting bigger. People are getting stronger. They're living longer. They think they found something where people can live for hundreds of years, which is a form of manipulation as well.
Okay, so let me just quickly
I'm gonna let you go ahead.
Nephilim, and I'll move into how this connects into our day and age. And you had mentioned the size of a cedar, and I think you're probably referring to Amos 2:9, and that's where it says, "I destroyed the Amorite." And if somebody reads the book, I'll prove and point out to people that the Amorites were hybrid Nephilim.
Yes.
That were in the Promised Land. And it says, "I destroyed the Amorite before them, though he was tall as cedars and strong as oak." So it's interesting that you're using cedar and oak there. So I thought I would just throw that in because it just struck me.
I've read that. So that's why I threw it in. People need to read people need to read their Bible. This thing is interesting.
Yeah. And so not only were these things tall, they weren't tall slender beings. These were muscular beings. Their width was 50% wider than a human in terms of its height to width ratio.
Wow.
So, where a human's height to width ratio would be like 3 to 1, the Nephilim were 2 to 1. And then they had 6 fingers. And they also looked like their fathers, the seraphim angels. So they had this face of a viper. They had a longer neck, and a knack is defined. Another giant named in the Bible after the flood. One of the translations is long neck. And they had slanted eyes, and they had high cheekbones and protruding chins. So if anybody ever wants to go see a King Tut museum, go see Akhenaten and see how similar King Akhenaten looks like a snake, and that's like 1250 BC. And so their eyes also glowed. These were fearful, terrifying monsters, and they did corrupt the earth in terms of not only corrupting the earth, but destroying the earth in their rampage. And they also drank blood, which was a constitutive part after Genesis 6, where the next generations were no longer immortal, because they were drinking blood not only to enhance their cognizant abilities, but they also wanted to use blood in a way that would somehow extend their lives. And this whole thing extends out through the vampire mythos and in so many other different areas when we talk about blood. But I just wanted to finish off what we're talking about in that aspect of what a Nephilim was. Now, when we talk about the Nephilim in Genesis 6, we also have to talk about the whole world was corrupted. And what do we mean by the whole world? Well, we're talking about possible DNA manipulations that were going on, because the technologies that they had learned and what I had talked about in the development of the 7 sacred sciences and into the secret societies and the mystical religions, they were developing this information. And if you look at mythology, and I don't care whether it's a centaur, right, or a Pegasus, or some of these beings that might be in the Indian culture, where you have a multi-armed being, or you have a head of an elephant. I believe this was commonplace in the time before the flood, that their technology had developed that level, and so they were probably also creating other kinds of DNA manipulated human beings. In the Gnostic religions, they'll talk about the creation of Enamaka Seth, and he is developed in a cloud, what the centaurs were.
Wow.
And that just reeks of me of DNA manipulation.
Now, when you said the head of this and the head of that, I have to go back to the Egyptians now. A lot of people think that those were masks.
No, they weren't.
They're not. The thing is they see these hieroglyphics and they see these paintings on the wall of the eagle head or whatever animal, the cat head or whatever on a body, just like the Sphinx. You have that head on a lion's body, and people think that nobody ever questioned why would they do that. Why would they do that? Why would you combine two beings? You might want to look into it.
They must have either had some of the best psychedelic drugs in the world, or the greatest imagination in the world for people apparently who didn't know anything, because they were so dumb, as we would be taught in school.
Goodness.
Why not? Hey, they were actually recording what they saw.
Exactly.
And what their history was. And if you were to go to somebody up from Greece and say that, your mythology about the Titans or whatever, they get offended. They get offended because, no, they don't look at that as their mythology. They look at that as their history.
That's their history.
As the Aztecs look at their history. And so when we demean their history this way, it is hubris beyond expression at times.
Yeah, I think that's our way of trying to put ourselves in a most superior mindset of like, oh, that's made up.
We have to be evolving to gods, correct?
Right. Exactly, but they don't realize, one of the things that when you become a Greek citizen is that you have to take, as we call it, Greek mythology, which is, like you said, their history. You have to know this stuff in order to even be a Greek citizen. That's how serious it is. And I don't think people understand that what may seem like a myth to us, like Gary said, is truly history. And people are just telling you what their history is. Why is it that our history, we have a tendency of thinking that that is the history of the world, meaning all cultures. And anybody who thinks outside of that, well, they're making stuff up. And that's not true.
What comes out of this is, how do we create a Superman by whatever means? Mm-hmm. And that's the new man concept, whether it's the Nazi genetic program, or it's DNA manipulation, or it's alien hybrids, mm-hmm. or fallen angels that are going to be mating or doing more DNA manipulation in the end time, or it's transhumanism as we might know it today, or it's modifications of not only animals but all the different foods. I believe all of this took place in the times of Noah, and that's why the whole earth had become corrupt. Mm-hmm. Not just the actions of humankind, but this whole thing spread through, and to find a pure lineage of humans that weren't corrupted in this manner.
Right. This is bigger.
Or animals must have been a challenge if that was the case.
This is bigger than God, basically destroying the world because of Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah. This is, like you said, manipulation of humankind to the point where it's devouring itself. And I mean, if you're doing stuff like that, these things have appetites that are beyond control. I mean, even now, like you said, we have superhumans, just like we have super soldiers, and Russ Dizdar is always talking about super soldiers as far as what they're doing to the soldiers now to even manipulate their sight so that they pretty much have tiger DNA or cat DNA so they can see at night without any type of contraption or device. So
they're creating animals that glow.
Yeah.
What they're going, and there are no rules to what they're doing.
Yeah.
Just as there was no rules in the times before the flood. None of this was done to honor the true God of the universe.
No.
And it was designed to lead people away from God. And so God was being disrespected, just as what we see going on today, because none of science, and again, probably something we'll touch on maybe in another show about that science is not objective. It is a religion, and it affects it with its bias. They do not, and in that bias, they do not give God credit for anything. They would rather give the most bizarre idea credibility than suggest there might be some creationism that would go back to God.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that, because people don't even understand. I mean, they don't believe in God. They don't believe God spoke things into existence, but the very word universe is basically one speaks, basically, or just a spoken word. You know, a verse is a spoken word. So, university, okay? I mean, oh, we're so smart, we're stupid. It's just amazing that, like you said, science is a religion. People will defend it as if it is their God. It is their God. And unfortunately, thanks DARPA, they are doing all of this manipulation and all of this corruption of the image of God, which is us, to basically do what? To glorify not God, as you said, but to glorify man, or to glorify Satan themselves. Narcissistic.
And so that they choose independence from God, and that we choose not to worship God, and therefore we do not accept the gift of eternity that is our free choice to accept or not. So they're in the whole mix of this thing, trying to turn our heads around and inside out so that as few people as possible will be taken into eternity. They know, and they know from when Jesus was in the grave, that when he was in the grave, he visited these spirits and these fallen angels and said, "It's done.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I'm going to show the world that I have risen, and your rebellion is done."
Yeah.
And therefore, all they can do now, and they are permitted to tempt and to try and prevent as many from humankind from being saved as possible.
And they're doing a good job at it, unfortunately.
And they do. And what they also do in this as part of Lucifer's revenge. And why, whether it's the Freemasons or the different religions or all the other different factions that are out there, they feel they can win.
Yeah.
They feel they can win because that's what the Luciferic and mystical religions teach them.
Right.
Is that Lucifer is the equal of God, and that it's this dualistic good versus evil concept that everybody's familiar with in entertainment,
right.
and none can gain strength over the other.
Right.
In that sort of aspect.
Right.
And so they believe that, and they are teaching these followers of secret societies and mystical religions and a whole bunch of other different sects that are out there that you can gain your freedom from God just as we have. They're selling this delusion and a lie, and they're going to sell it en masse to the world in the end time.
And that's just it, you know, and it's funny that you ended right where we got like 6 minutes left. We got to keep this going. But unfortunately, we can't keep it going tonight. But on that note, I do have to say this. It is a lie, all of it. I think deep down inside, and I know that Lucifer, he knows he's going to lose. And he knows what the end is. I think his whole concept now is, let's see how many people I can get to go to hell with me. How many of these people that you love so much can I destroy? It's like a chess match.
It is, and he's permitted to do so because God has ordained that to happen. He isn't doing it because he's not permitted to. He is there to make it difficult for people to really think about things, to make that choice, because this is a very, very, very important choice. And in the process, I think what he may delude himself deep down is that perhaps if so many people don't follow the ways of God because he's been able to lead them astray, perhaps God will have mercy and allow him to have his own realm that's separate.
Yeah, okay, wait for that.
And justify his rebellion that way. I don't think that, well, we know that that's not going to happen because
right.
The Bible says it's not going to happen in Revelation, but he could still be thinking that in a legalistic term in court that he might win that. But failing that, he wants to have as few people being raised above the angels as possible.
Yeah, that's the whole point. That's the whole thing. He doesn't like us. I don't understand why we fall for the old okie doke. To be honest with you, I have to say it, and I say it on just about every show. If you don't know Jesus, get to know him, because there's a great deception that's coming, and this is going to be part of it. The manipulation of man from I think, honestly, Gary, I think we're being manipulated right now. I think we're being altered right now, from the chemtrails in the air to the food we eat to the water we drink to the television we watch or the media, to everything, the education or indoctrination that we get. We're being changed from the inside out. And in order for that manipulation not to take place, you need to have Jesus Christ. You need to have the Holy Spirit, because if you do not have that, you're going to be easily targeted. You're already targeted, but you're going to be easily captured. It's
your only way of discerning is faith in Jesus and God and reading the Bible. And, you know, I have a post that's out there on Facebook today, and it sort of came up in the posting of the word sorcery. Mm-hmm. In Greek, the word sorcery is pharmakia, if I've got the pronunciation right, but pharmaceutical is the root word. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of people, because when they look at sorcery in the book of Revelation in the New Testament, believe that may be referring to the prescription drug epidemic that's out there and is being overprescribed. And again, what a perfect avenue to have mind-altering other chemicals put in to help people perhaps accept the delusion more, or would be available with down the road if they wanted to do that. And to finish off with your point on that is that yes, the food and the chemtrails and everything that they do, I believe, is corrupting the earth in a manner similar to the way it was before the flood, and in a way that they can bring about the end time. Yeah. And that is the goal. They want to bring this rendezvous with destiny about.
Yeah, they do. But Gary, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. But before we go, and before I let you go, tell people where they can get your book. I'm telling you, it's 98 chapters, guys. but it's a good 98 chapters. I'm telling you right now. My book is a little marked up, so I can't even pass it on.
No problem.
I can't even pass it on right now.
And you had mentioned earlier, the short chapters, and each chapter is a story within a story that keeps coming up as the book unfolds. So you don't have to read it all at once. You can go read a few chapters, come back, go back and reread it once it starts coming up again, if that's what you want to do. So it's a large book, but it's designed that you can digest it over time. And there is a lot of information.
It's a lot of information. Go ahead and tell people where they can find your book. Give them your website, phone number if you want to, how they can reach you, the whole 9 yards.
So my book is available through my website at www.genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis6conspiracy.com with the number 6. And if you want to find out more about the book, I've got an excerpt of each of the 98 chapters, a generous excerpt, so you can get a good feel for the book. I've got, I like to load all my interviews up there under the media section and the newer ones on the front, which I have more work to do there. And you can go to the Buy Now section and Buy from Author and click on that, and I can do an autographed copy and send it to you. If you want to buy it from Amazon, it's carried on Amazon around the world. So for the US, Amazon.com, and I also have a link on that from my website as well. Also at BarnesandNoble.com, and it's available through most all online bookstores around the world. It's also available through your Christian bookstore if you want to support your local Christian bookstore. It's distributed through Send the Light Distribution. So if they don't have it on the shelf, they can certainly order it from STL. And it's also available in Kindle version. So if somebody wanted a digital version, it is available that way as well.
Cool. That works. Also, guys, friend him on Facebook. He's always on Facebook. Or you can actually see some of the stuff he writes on Next Chapter Radio Network on our group page. Gary's always in there as well. But anyway, that is it for us. Like I said, hit him up on Facebook. He's also on Twitter. Mm-hmm. So
that's at Gary Wayne 63.
All right. That is it for us, Gary. I do appreciate you coming on the show. We got to continue this. Hopefully we can get a series going and keep it going, because we didn't even scratch the surface. We just
got going.
Yeah, we just all we did was just touch the cover. That's all we did. We didn't even open the book yet. We just touched the cover. But check us out next time. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Gary, for joining me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Take care. Wow, it's been one interesting show tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you ever miss a show or would like to go back and revisit some of the old ones that Next Chapter Radio Network has, all you have to do is you can just go to iTunes and type in Next Chapter Radio Network, and you can see every show that the network puts out. Doesn't matter whether it's under Surrender Radio, Next Chapter Radio, The Real, or Jerusalem Radio. All shows, all episodes are under Next Chapter Radio Network. The same goes for Spreaker. The same goes for archive.org, and the same goes for nextchapterradio.blogspot.com. You can go to any one of those sites and you can listen to any show that you want to listen to. It doesn't matter. I do have to say this. We will be expanding in the future. I don't know exactly when, but I know it's going to happen pretty soon. So just look out for some excitement coming from the network. If you would like to join our network group, go ahead, get on Facebook and just ask to join Next Chapter Radio Network. We'll gladly accept you. You just want to keep it clean, people, because if you don't keep it clean, you know we're going to have to say something to you. But nevertheless, go ahead. We would love to have you on so you can catch what's going on in the network, what new shows are coming up, where we're going to be in the future, because eventually that's going to happen. But right now, we're not doing that. We're keeping it very bare bones. We're grassroots. We're starting out. We're trying to do this ministry according to what God allows us to do. And you know what? We don't want to mess anything up. So we're kind of taking our time with it. Also, if you guys feel, and I do have to say this, if you guys feel that this network has ministered to you, you really enjoy listening to, let's say, Surrender Radio with Maria Nichols, you like listening to that, or you like listening to Next Chapter Radio or Jerusalem Radio or this new show, which is The Real, listen, by all means, and you want to support us or tithe into the ministry so that we can continue to do what we do, because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think people realize it costs money to do this. It may not cost, we don't have a big production where we're sitting in a studio, but I'm going to tell you, it costs costs money to do what we do. I mean, it's more than just you buy the equipment and that's it, you're done. You have to house this stuff. There's hosting costs. There's a lot of stuff that you have to pay for on the back end that a lot of listeners don't know about. But we do this because we're called to do it. But it does take funds to do it. And if you would like to help us out and help us share in this ministry, maybe partner up with us, you feel free. All you have to do, if you would like to donate to us at this ministry so that we can keep it going, you can go to www.ncrnetwork.com. You'll see something that says donate, make a donation. Click on that. There you go. You can just do the PayPal thing or use your credit card, whichever, and donate whatever amount you want to donate. It doesn't matter. Every bit definitely helps us with staying on the air. And believe you me, there's been a few people that have been a blessing that they don't even realize they've paid for Skype. They've paid for Spreaker for us to have a place to host this. They've paid for Bibles for us to be able to give out for free. We'd like to expand our ministry so that we can actually give to the elderly and also make donations to pro-life groups. For now, I bid you all a week filled with grace and peace in the Lord Jesus Christ. We'll see you all. God bless you. Good night.